thank you, Nuria and Blanca, for hospitality. Okay, you see, you have a text. Well, it's a little bit crazy, you know, to follow. It's better to just read, not to listen to me. But well, you see at the beginning, first chapter, this is small thank you. Then my task. My task here, you see, inclusion, exclusion. You see this small slash between them. And in the title, inclusion / exclusion, that slash is very important for me. You have in a subtitle on the conditions of common or critical engagement. I add this critical engagement. Okay, this is not... Okay, we can talk about difference probably today, tomorrow, about why this critical is important. And well, you see, trouble lies in this third, this one in between, this slash or stroke or barra obliqua, yeah?
Inclinada. Barra inclinada.
Inclinada, yeah. And stroke in Britain, slash in American. And well, this is position. All this idea is how to have a right for or to slash before inclusion or exclusion. Does exist some kind of time before or right to something before the decision, because decision is already some kind of exclusion. Well, this is first page. Second page. What is this? This slash or stroke. First of all, this is something violent. Yeah, on one way, we can hear that this is something stroke slash. Yeah, and but the problem in this is more that functions slash as conjunction than disjunction. That means the sign slash does not represent a brief pause, nor does it imply urgency to hasten in the choice of either inclusion or exclusion. The principal word here is urgency, because urgency is always problematic. You could not find many texts about urgency. Urgency is urge. What does it mean? To do something fast, or not to do. Well, on the contrary, it would appear that inclusion and exclusion, thanks precisely to the register covered by this sign slash, are mutually interwoven or interchangeable or interpermeable one into the other, and are extraordinarily difficult to separate and handle. It is for this reason necessary, this is what I would like to insist on today, to construct a right to non-separation of the inclusion from the exclusion, or better, right to the slash. Okay, before I attempt, because for me inclusion and exclusion are not symmetrical, not reciprocal, how to say, and well, few preliminary and regulative principles. First, at the end of this page 2, you have inclusion or integration and exclusion, as well as the slash space appear where we can find this binarity, inclusion and exclusion, where we have some kind of project or possibility for the constitution. That means something which is closing. Claudere is to close, excludere is not to allow in, admit, nor expel. Where you have some kind of fictitious entity, as family, group, corporation, movement, city, state, Europe, or world state, you have immediately idea or inclusion or exclusion or slash. That means in project as such you have question of future, this is the end of the page, construction and projection of actions to be conducted in the near future. That is that means the project or future or next step implies always inclusion slash exclusion. First note, this is I think very important text. This is published also in English 2 years ago. The Massimo Cacciari, what is the project, what is the progetto, and one beautiful sentence, violenza suona nel progetto. Why? Because in this is explanation in note 1, it is an act of overshooting and expanding to beyond the surface or age, proictus, age is a proictus in Latin, which then always implies exclusion, abolishment, banishment, expulsion, proicto. Expulsion is proicto in Latin. Exclusion, expulsion, or elimination are moments about which we must think in the context of the project, only in the most abstract sense, without dwelling on them, yet also aware that in order for a group to constitute itself temporarily and work actively, which would mean work on a project, when you have a project, that means this is idea of future cooperation, etc. But in the same time, in a project, you have a necessity to exclude all insufficiently engaged or committed, insufficiently competent, dynamic, even insufficiently intelligent, and as a social. Well, with project, you have immediately idea to close something, to close the group, to be together, and that implies exteriority and then elimination. Second, the condition of common. Well, that's why engagement. That's why engagement in our head, and that's why engagement as a subtitle, common engagement, or in one jurist, very important German, he wrote one text, Die aktive Solidarobligación, active obligation of solidarity, from 1886. Well, engagement ought to be beyond the inclusion or exclusion principle, will be fulfilled if and only if an ideal institution opens its doors to all without exception. That's the important. And well, if I act, you see on the second page, never mind, this note may be interesting with Michael Dammit text, never mind now. But engagement, and if I act in a way, third page, in a way anyone would act, and in the way everyone should act. That means engagement is not well, engagement when it comes to another person. This is 4 lines. When it comes to another person, for example, engagement to marriage, or engagement in a war, in a political party, in a football supporters group, movement, etc., etc. In that case, this is not common and critical engagement, because they a priori exclude others and exclude the possibility of all to be included. That's why critique, and that's why some kind of, if you want to imagine Kant through the Amartya Sen, critical reasoning. That means consists of engaged acts when it obligates to urgent action not only members of the group, but all future inactive members or parts of the human community, or in one of the last text, which is not published, the Butler, global commitment. She mentioned this phrase, okay, global commitment, you have this differently. In Nagel, 10 years ago, global justice. And in Sen, last year, he repeated, he tried to thematize this global justice. That means this is, you see the difference, and we are trying all, not just an institute, but I think in critical engagement implies this, that we must think about engagement which is universal, not just engagement with literary senses, for example, engagement in war or engagement with partner, for example. Okay, and third, only those whose action or whose engagement actively excludes all or other groups could be temporarily marginalized. Well, this is the right to exclude, to exclusion. When we have to exclude somebody. Only I think, only those whose action or whose engagement actively excludes all or other groups could be temporarily marginalized, but not formally or categorically not eliminated or disqualified. Well, you see explanation in notes 3 and 4, this categorically and this pleonasm marginalized. Marginalized is a good example. For example, I have one idiot in institute, and I'm trying to marginalize him, not to exclude him. This is my idea. I don't want to exclude him, but sometimes he wants to be excluded. He wants to be on the place of marginalized. That's the problem with the place. How to place somebody, where to place, for example, this Alternative für Deutschland. Alternative in Note 4. Alternative in Deutschland, they are currently present in the Bundestag, but exclude them from there is anti-democratic act. We have to marginalize them. We must marginalize them. Why? Because they have in program this idea to exclude the others, all or some groups. We have a right to marginalize. And you see in note 3, 2 texts, for example, that Susan Dovey tried to find the justification for exclusion. I think Roberto is at the end of the table. Hi, Roberto. Roberto knows very well that in Carl Schmitt, for Carl Schmitt, democracy is exclusion of minority. We will see here sometimes, but well, not just in democracy, but this is the same technique. When we have a right to exclude, or does exclusion is sometimes democratic procedure or democratic strategy. Or page 5, asymmetrical distinction, inclusion, exclusion, slash, and in the middle of the page you have some kind of motto and some kind of problem of the text. You have a quotation or a fragment from the letter of Marquise d'Argent de Dirac, de Voltaire, 2nd of December 1761. I wish you, he said, I wish you in your retirement fulfilled days, friends who think, the absence or exclusion of idiots, and good health. Well, des amis qui pensent l'exclusion des sots et une bonne santé. L'exclusion des sots is problematic always. How to exclude, and is it necessarily exclude the other register, because sometimes morons or idiots have the other ideas. Page 6. Where is the problem? Problem is at the beginning, namely the ability to reason, because idiots on one side and on the other side probably reasonable people with, well, the ability to reason always assumes deft manipulation of various techniques and protocols of exclusion. It means you are clever if you are capable to exclude. In that, differently, you are not clever. What does it mean? One who is capable, for example, of concentrating or directing his attention completely excludes something or all else. For example, 2 days ago on Sunday, I focused on the police outside of my entrance in my building where I live in Bonn, and immediately I put through the glass door with the nose and head, because I excluded possibility that there exists something on the other side, because I love police, yeah. And okay, you remember that this idea that Napoleon has possibility to work 7 things, 7, he said, 7 in the same time. That means what kind of focus he had. That means he didn't exclude nothing. In the same time, this is some kind of intelligence, and he was very clever in that. But well, in the same time, 7. This is not 77. Well, one capable of counting makes good use of the method of exclusion in such situation when, for example, all variables are systematically excluded. One capable of thinking, and whom Voltaire a priori classifies as a friend, probably makes very good use of the 3 basic laws of the thought, one of which is the el principio del tercero excludio. Yeah. That means law of excluded middle in English, the other 2 laws or principles being the law of identity and the law of contradiction. If we put aside all the other operations and social acts or acts of the community that always in one way or another imply exclusion, for example, that's why Carl Schmitt I mentioned, when we choose, we exclude, when we vote, we exclude, when we decide, we exclude, in competitions, we exclude, etc. The competence of those who think, Voltaire calls them friends, among else would be to exclude, because by thinking they continuously exclude those who think or act problematically. In a word, the incompetent. Well, on the page 6 in a note you have very good fragment of Robert Dahl. The demos, I quote, "The demos must include all adult members of the association except transients and persons proved to be mentally defective," for example. And okay, it's beautiful to mention that social acts or soziale Akte or Gemeinschaftsakte, this is not the phrase of Searle or Margaret Gilbert, that this is Husserl. Well, page 7, incompetence. It's interesting, in English, competence as a legal term because this is a synonym for jurisdiction, as well as colloquially to someone's ability to perform a task, intellectual or not otherwise. Only the competent ought to be given competence. The incompetent must be excluded from competence. Then you have some kind of rhetorics of the text, not too much important, beautiful to read and to talk about this, but never mind, this is Voltaire, and because the problem is how is it necessary to exclude the stupids or the idiots, and at the end of the page you have when it comes to histories of institutions and common engagement, Voltaire's advice and counsel, which have lost none of their currency or appeal, have nevertheless implied only two options. Well, we have just two options. First, those excluded or that which is excluded ought to be eliminated or grouped or pseudo-institutionalized on the periphery or margins of an entity, be transferred to some new, isolated, secured zones. This is first technique, how to, you accept migrants and put them in a ghetto, or you accept, I don't know, you put all our cities are constructed like this, that the workers are on periphery. This is first strategy. Also, when you in English, for example, in medicine, when you are saying he is institutionalized, that means he's crazy. Institution is imagined as a medicine against crazy and disability, etc., etc. And second strategy, the more sophisticated option, the attempt to mitigate the damage by introducing or adding new actors. For example, if I have one idiot in my institute, it will be better to bring 4 people more, and in that case, inclusion will mitigate exclusion, etc., etc. The problem with morons, however, is that they are always evenly and dispersedly distributed, because morons are morons because they are not grouped, and we have a problem always it's impossible to group them, and in that case it's difficult to solve this problem with both strategies. The third option is my proposition. I think I try to force some kind of proposition and justify this. That's why slash. That's why something between, because you always it's politically correct to repeat all the time inclusion, but in inclusion this is not enough. The right for third option, okay, we can see right for third option you have in logic. In Aristotle, in note 10, Aristotle invented but also called into question the principio de tercero excludio when distinguishing between judgments about the future that can be neither true nor false, just as Voltaire's wishes for the Marquise cannot exclude some third possibility. That means third possibility, the judgments about the future, it's impossible to put them well. Here you have what is the project? Project is something against the future, because you must. That's why you have paradoxically project. If you have a project, you must put all things, put the future in an order. For example, when we are writing some kind of project, we must know what we will do every step by step. And in that case, we are making some kind of some kind of mistake, logical mistake, because it's impossible. This is the same logic you have in, for example, in preventive war. That was at the end of his life. Putnam said very very simple thing, that it's impossible, this is epistemologically incorrect to think that the other could or would attack us. That means we don't know. Well, what common or critical engagement, on which I insist, assumes broad action that is necessarily in part epistemological, and does not only include or bind or involve Voltaire's amis qui pensent, or friends who think. That means it also must include those others whose acts, it seems to me, we still understand insufficiently and rarely take into consideration. And, well, for this, provisionally I will here call them negative social acts. Negative social acts, well, this is one phenomenologist, Reinach, imagined this phrase. That means you have many acts which are not social in our society, and what we have to do with them, that's the idea, how to justify the presence of those acts in our society, in group, and probably they are necessary for the constitution of the group. You see in note 12 the Martin Nussbaum, the capabilities of people with cognitive disabilities is the same. It's a good, how to say, good synonym for idiots or morons. Martin Nussbaum insists exclusively that, well, that's the problem, that the law ought to show respect for them as fully equals. Law must provide, law must go further. This is the beginning, but we know that this is not enough. This is just beginning, but beginning, how to say, necessarily, we must start with this. For example, a group, if we imagine one group where we have a group in a car, when we have one invalid in a car, and if we imagine that a group pushing a car that has broken down is not, how to say, destabilized unless one of them is a disabled person who cannot participate in this action in the same way. That means it's possible to participate in this action to push the car on different way, or temporary, that guy or that girl will be temporarily marginalized, but in the other action he or she will be at the top and leader. Problem is, how can we classify all these acts which are not complementary and in harmony with the acts of the majority? And okay, the end is okay, this is the task for all of us. You can find here Husserl, there are many phrases in Husserl like this, not just in Husserl, there are many phrases in the history of philosophy like this. That means that abnormal or the anomalen have no rights, practically have no rights to constitute the world and their institutions. And in this, I'm not sure that this is translated in Spanish, this is translated a little bit in French, not in English. In note 14, Husserl provides, because he mentioned my normal we, meines normalen wir, at the end of this text, at the end of this sketch. As early in 1931, he wonders about the problem of the participation of the abnormal in the constitution of the world. This includes who are abnormal, foreigners, animals, children, twisted, verrückten, the eel, but also thieves, cheats, pseudo-honest, or pseudo-citizens. This is beautiful. Scheinbürger, pseudo-citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Petar.
Thank you.